exciting to see labor and community and the private sector and education all coming together to deliver on the equity agenda. I don't know how many of you read the Steve Jobs book, but I spend a lot of time on airplanes, so I read all the books. And I was reading that one, and I was struck by a line in it in which Steve Jobs was talking about how in the early days, the artists that he had surrounded himself with, there was a lot of uncertainty as to whether or not the artist could really produce something and they could ship it and it would get to where it needed to be to sell. And when they finally got that first shipment out, he walked into the room with all of the people he was working with and he said, "Artists, ship." And I thought that was a great line. I thought that was a great line because it reminded me of so much of what we do together when we bring our passion and we bring our vision and we bring our dreams, we bring our commitment, we bring our outrage, and when we bring all that together, we come up with really visionary, exciting ideas. And when we're sitting around our kitchen tables or sitting around our conference tables or sitting around a bar having a drink, talking about what we need in this nation, it often feels like it's such a long way from those visions to actually delivering. And I think the Emerald Cities Collaborative is an example of the fact that visionaries deliver. Visionaries deliver. And we need a lot of visionaries to deliver because we're at an amazing moment. A moment fraught with risk and uncertainty and full of possibility. The most possibility that the nation has ever seen. Ever. Because we have finally got all the people in the room and all the issues on the table. And it's taken us a long time to get there, a very long time. And we have all the people in the room and all the issues on the table really coming together around one agenda, which is why we can get labor and community in the private sector and education together around this idea of how do we take advantage of the moment to build the green economy, to build opportunity, to build career pathways, to build everything that we need, to green our cities, build our communities, and to strengthen democracy. When you come up with a big idea like that, you have to do it with someone else. I always say to the people that I work with at PolicyLink, we come up with an agenda that we can do alone. We need to go back to the drawing board. Because if you can do it by yourself, it is not worth doing. It is not worth doing. So we're coming together around the Emerald Cities Collaborative, but we're coming together as a nation. People who have worked in silos and worked separately, understanding that the moment to achieve equity is now. When I use the term equity, I mean just and fair inclusion into a society in which all can participate and prosper. And the work of equity is to create the conditions that allow all to reach their full potential. Equity. We spend a lot of time in this nation talking about disparities in the educational system, health disparities, income disparities, wealth disparities. I'm losing the language of disparities. I'm just getting rid of it. Because disparities really is just a description of a difference. What we're really talking about is inequities, health inequities, educational inequities, wealth inequities. Because when you talk about inequities, you're bringing judgment to what you see. When you talk about inequities, there's something unjust and unfair about it. Unjust and unfair about it. Not just a gap, but an unjust and an unfair gap. And when we start talking about equity, we're not talking about doing just enough to close a gap. We're talking about doing enough to allow people to reach their full potential, to prosper, to fully participate. So it's the inequities we need to address, and it's equity that we need to achieve. All of you have always sought to achieve equity. We've done it because it clearly was the right thing to do. We've worked on it because there was a moral imperative to do something about the fact that so many people were being unjustly and unfairly left behind in this nation. That equity agenda has now moved to a new state of urgency because we're at a crucial moment. The nation is in trouble. The middle class that the nation has been so proud of, justifiably so, is vulnerable and shrinking. The economy that has made the country one of the most powerful in the world is now struggling to hold on to its place in the global economy. The democracy that this nation has been so proud of for so many years is barely anything worth talking about on the global stage if it can't work in the context of the difference that defines the nation. We really know that we have to deal with the issues of climate change, and many of the elements that have to do with really responding to climate change get right back to what happens in our cities. What happens in our cities? What happens in our poor communities? Everything that we have as an agenda item that has to be fixed dovetails, intersects completely with the thing that's defining us in this first half of the 21st century, and that is our changed and changing demographics. California's way ahead of the curve. In California, 73% of all children under 18 are children of color: Native American, Asian, Pacific Islanders, Latino, African American, and other. 73%. Nationally, that number is 46.5%. By the end of this decade, the majority of all children in the United States of America will be children of color. Already the majority of babies born. By the time we get to 2030, the majority of the young workforce will be of color. I always say America can easily see its future. It's a 5-year-old Latina. It's a 7-year-old black boy. It's a 12-year-old Native American. It's a 17-year-old Asian youth. What happens to them will determine the fate of the nation. It will determine the fate of the nation. That equity agenda that we have all worked on because we were inspired by something that we saw coming along, because our parents instilled in us a sense of justice, because our own lives have carved out for us a path that we couldn't just do for ourselves and push away the obstacles we wanted to do for others. Many reasons that we were brought to the equity agenda. Well, what you need to know is that everything you've known and everything you've learned has now become urgent, because equity isn't just a moral imperative. It's not only a moral imperative. It has become a national imperative and an economic imperative. Equity is the superior growth model for the future. And unless we get that right, the future will not be bright. And so when we look at the models that we're building, whether they're in education, whether they're in health, whether they're in community, whether it's in building the green economy, everything we do, whatever we do, we have to have an equity bottom line also. Because it's not worth doing now if it's not also advancing equity. There are fabulous examples of things that are going on around the country. I spend a lot of time flying around the country, and even though I'd often rather be at home, every time I turn up someplace else these days, I'm happy that I'm there, because every place I go, people are talking about equity, they're showing off what they're doing, they're taking the ideas that have been floating around and they're being grabbed by government officials, they're being grabbed by community groups, they're being grabbed by national leaders, because people are recognizing that we have a wealth of knowledge about how to move forward in an equitable way, and that we have all these openings. I was just in Portland on Friday, and when I was in Portland, people were telling me about their Office of Equity and Human Rights. And they were very proud to introduce me to the man that they had recruited from someplace else to head it up. And he and I had dinner together, and he was full of good ideas. I also heard about their equity efforts to deal with, around emerald cities, around transportation, around a whole host of issues. And what's so interesting about Portland, if you know it, is that Portland is really a place that has been very progressive on the sustainability and the green agenda, really leading the country. They've been very good in the smart growth arena in terms of really using their built environment and bikes and walking paths and dense living. But when you go there, people will tell you, particularly people of color, they will say, yes, Portland is all that. And the problems that you have in Oakland and Detroit and other places, we have them here too. People of color are being left behind. The black community that used to be quite large is now shrinking as gentrification is happening. I sat and talked with someone who was telling me about the fact that the very things that make Portland so green, those very things are pushing people out of communities that turn out to be well located, that tend to be by parks, all of those kind of amenities that people want. And I went to a meeting the day that I left. There were probably 350 people in the room, and the topic was how to talk about race, how to deal with racism, how to make sure that Portland could do well across all of the indicators, not just some of them. I was in Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities, and talking to the person who runs their metropolitan planning organization. And she was telling me how they have adopted equitable development and achieving regional equity as their organizing principle. And everything that they were doing in terms of first hire and all of those things to try to deal with the equity agenda. I could tell you a story from every city I've been to in the past year where somebody in that city is doing something around equity. So we're at an amazing point, and we've got to go to speed up, and we've got to change the national conversation. We have to speed up because we don't have a lot of time, and we have to change the national conversation because how unfair is it at the very moment when our moment has come, when we know more than we ever thought we would know about how to deliver on the equity agenda, somebody tells us that there's no money. Now, what does that feel like? We are not a poor country, and we need to stop acting like one. We just need to stop acting like one. We have the resources to do anything we want to do. In this state alone, we have over 700,000 millionaires. Over 700,000 millionaires in this state alone. We have so many people who have so much money, it is just ridiculous that we are sending children to school with no books, that we have communities where the housing stock is crumbling. We have people ready and able to go to work who can't go to work because there's no bus, there's no transportation to be able to get them there. We are disinvesting in our infrastructure, disinvesting in our people, disinvesting in our future. We are beginning to almost move into a conversation about how to live under a period of austerity, and we are the wealthiest country on the face of the earth. It is ridiculous. We need to change that conversation. We need to stop getting pulled into that. I was on a panel once, too recently, in Washington that was a very, very liberal panel. And the first thing that the person said, who was representing what I would have thought a very progressive point of view, is that we all agree we have to do something about the deficit. I said, well, isn't this the problem that we all agree on that? Isn't that the problem that we're all agreeing on that? I mean, don't just put it out as a truth, put it out as a problem. We need to stop all agreeing on that and start agreeing on what it is we need to do to put enough money in people's pockets that they are paying taxes, enough investment in our future that we are producing something and we're actually building our economy. We need to get a different attitude, and the first change has to be to let go of this notion that we don't have any money. We have the money, we have the knowledge, we have the moment, we need to use it. The last thing I want to point out is that we know how to deal with equity. And again, California has shown us the way in the past. After World War II, California did not have a very bright future. It had a population that was not very healthy. Half the population did not have a high school diploma. 25% of the population lived below the poverty level. California looked at this population and saw it as an asset, the only asset they really had. And they decided to invest in that asset. And by investing in that asset under Republican and Democratic governors, Earl Warren and Pat Brown, California invested in that uneducated, poorly prepared white population and became the best state along any measure you can possibly imagine. Best school system, best healthcare system, best infrastructure. Till by 1960, Time magazine had a front page story, booming, bold, beautiful California. A 25% advantage in terms of growth and salary over the rest of the nation. That was an equity agenda. Taking what you have, looking at where you need to be, and investing in those people everything that they and the places where they live needed in order to reach the goal that would lead to prosperity. California did that when the population was white. We now are becoming a nation in which the majority will be people of color. It is up to us to do it again. It is up to us to do it again, and you're part of that vanguard. Thank you.